I recall a few years ago, I was working a job that I believed in. I had studied for this job. I was a teacher and I liked teaching, but at the same time, there was this growing lack of fulfillment on the inside of me. Outwardly, my life looked just fine. I had a nice house and cars that ran well and a good family, but I also had this lack of fulfillment that was becoming like an emptiness on the inside of me. I recall during a couple of years of struggle with that, I went to a school field trip at a zoo, and I came across this enclosure that was about as big as a large living room, maybe a tall ceiling, and right in the middle of this enclosure was a tree. And the tree spread out and it filled most of the space. And as I looked around, I couldn't see anything. So I did what I hate to do at the zoo, which is read anything. But I wanted to know what's in this cage. It was the shape of a dome, and when I looked to the placard, it said there was some kind of eagle inside of it. And I immediately wondered, how can there be an eagle in such a small space? And as I looked around, sure enough, there up on a branch was this eagle. And I feel like I spent about a year of my life having a conversation with that eagle about life. I thought about that eagle and how the eagle was safe and they don't allow the enemy into that cage. I thought about how it's well provided for. And I was like, I feel just like that eagle. That's me. I've built a safe life and I'm provided for, but it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel like I'm really living. And there was a question that I hated to ask the eagle, that I had to ask the eagle in my mind, and that was, what's it like to never use your wings? Because in that cage there was no need for wings for that eagle. But you have wings, which represent a capability to do so much with your existence. And I hated to ask the eagle that question because in my mind, that was me. I felt like there was these wings hanging from my shoulders that wanted a reason to be used, but they weren't needed. I didn't need to use courage for my life. I didn't need to have boldness for my life. I was living for comfort. I was living for reputation. But my heart wasn't satisfied with that. My heart wanted more. If you're watching this video, you probably resonate with me. Your heart is wanting more than what you're experiencing with your life. And you might outwardly have a good job. It might be providing well for your family. You might have a house in a great neighborhood and great cars. But yet there's something inside of you that's tapping at you because you're unfulfilled even in success. I spoke with a dentist a while back, and she was about 50 years old, and she said, I'm afraid I chose the wrong career. She says, but now it's too late. And the way she's looking at her life, she felt that everything she did, her investment financially, her education, in building this practice, she feared that it was all just in vain, that she was going in the wrong direction the whole time. And the reason for her emptiness was she chose the wrong career. What a devastating place to get to. Before I go any further, let me just say that in my work with people, usually I'm able to help them see that it's not that you chose the wrong career. It's not that you can't change your career, but it's normally a shift in perspective that liberates us to live a different life. I recall a story of a man who was a pitcher for the New York Yankees, I believe the late 90s. He wasn't prominent, but he was on the roster when they won the World Series. And he tells the story of the night after they won. Just a couple hours after celebrating on the field, he said, we went from bar to bar to restaurant to party, just having fun with people. But he said, it wasn't that fun. He said, we would go from place to place being driven in limousines. And he said, in between two of these parties, I sat in the front seat with the driver. He said, I asked him, is this all this is? Because this man had played baseball his entire life and dreamed of playing in college and dreamed of playing in the major leagues. And now he's not only playing in the major leagues, but he's playing for the New York Yankees, and he's just won the World Series. There's no higher place to get to in baseball. Yet, even at that high place, it brought him to the lowest place. He even asked the driver to pull over and stop on the bridge. He wanted to jump. This is the kind of feeling that we can have in life when, on one hand, I'm so successful, but on the other hand, why do I feel unfulfilled in all of it? Why is there this lack of satisfaction? Why is there such a burden and an emptiness on the inside of me? My friend, if you're like this, I want you to hang on with me for the rest of this webinar, because I want you to have some clarity about your life. There's nothing wrong with you for having this kind of feeling. If anything, it's good that you're pausing long enough to listen to your heart. Because just the way that your body has hunger pains that remind you, I need to eat, and just the way that your body gets thirsty and it reminds you, I need water, our heart calls out to us, and it taps away at the inside of us, reminding us of something more that we need from life. So if you're feeling this unfulfillment and this emptiness, even while you're successful in life, there's nothing wrong with you. The thing to do is to listen to that tapping on the inside of you, because your heart isn't telling you you're messed up. Your heart probably isn't telling you you have the wrong job. Your heart is telling you there's more to be experienced in life, and your heart wants it. So you might be like my buddy Riley, who one time told me, they tell me my job is great and I'm set for life. He said, but the problem is, I don't know if I can work this job one more day. So what do you do when you have a successful life, good job, but you're feeling empty in all of it? In this webinar, I want to talk about three things with you. First of all, I want to talk about the massive mistake that we make when we reach these moments of crisis, because it is a crisis. Living an unfulfilled life is a real time of crisis. It makes us susceptible to things like addictions. It makes us susceptible to things like relationship issues, even affairs, because living an unfulfilled life is very dangerous. So I want to talk about the big mistake that people make when they reach these times in life where they're like, why is my job so unfulfilling? The second thing we'll talk about is the actual big problem that we have as human beings that we have got to discuss and we have got to acknowledge. And the third thing I want to talk about is the big solution, the amazing solution that we can all have for our lives. So let's first of all talk about the massive mistake that people make when they reach these times of crisis in life, where they feel unfulfilled in a successful life. And that is misidentifying the problem. It's so common that when life feels really dull, we tend to blame our job. Other people blame their marriage, but those are the most two common things we look at. Is when life feels empty, we say, oh, it's my job's fault. Now, the reason this is so critical is because when you misidentify a problem, you can't solve it, or the attempt to solve it won't work. If the problem isn't the job, then we can change jobs and just find a greater sense of unfulfillment. We can change jobs again and find even more unfulfillment. And with that, the frustration and anxiety of life even grows all the more. As a matter of fact, it's very common, if you look around at humanity, it is very common that we misidentify our problems. I recall a funny story from when one of my sons was in high school, and he said, Dad, my shoes are getting too small. And he played basketball, and I thought, well, I'm gonna go be the dad and get the perfect pair of shoes for him. So I said, son, let's go shopping. And at the shoe store, I did a really good job. I even pulled out that metal device that they have at the shoe store where you can put your foot in and it tells you the exact size you need. And so we did that. This is the ultimate asking for directions using the metal device at the shoe store. And so we got the size that he needed. I was like, great. And I said, by the way, what size do you have now? And he says, well, 10 and a half. And I was like, well, this metal thing says you need a size 10. How can they be too small? It says that your shoe is actually too big. If we get the size that you need, it's even smaller than what you have. So I don't think that's going to solve the problem. And sure enough, we got home to look at these shoes and figure out what's going on. And I asked him, so where are they too small? And he said, well, it's on the sides of my feet. It's too small. And sure enough, when he had gotten these shoes maybe a year before, they were kind of big, and he tightened them up to where the shoelaces, there was no gap in between. They were pulled all the way up to each other. And so I was like, Matthew, we just need to loosen your shoelaces, and that will solve the problem. Sometimes, and we're all guilty of this, we have something that appears to be the problem, and it makes us to then think we know what the apparent answer is, but it leads to a frustration because there is no solution because we've misidentified the problem. And when it comes to times in life where we're lacking fulfillment, we're lacking maybe zeal, it's so easy to say, well, it's my job. And maybe there is a time in life to transition careers. Normally, we do need to change careers at some points. But if we just quickly think, well, it's my job, it's my job, that's the reason I feel this way. Well, we can end up going on this goose chase where we're constantly looking for a job to make us feel a way that it can't make us feel. So that is the first mistake we make as human beings, is we mislabel what the problem actually is. Secondly, I want to talk about the big problem. The big problem is that there is an existential crisis that exists inside of all of us when our life is lacking a sense of meaning and purpose. We're all desperate for it. One of my favorite little videos is of my grandson. Recently, he was outside when the trash truck came by. He loves Trash Truck Day. He is so fired up. In this little video, you see him running down the sidewalk, and every time it's time for the trash truck to grab a trash can, he jumps and squeals in delight, and then he runs to the next trash can, and he's so excited. His life is so fulfilling. It's just a trash truck, but he couldn't be more excited about life. What happens to us? What happens to us as we grow older? We all go to kindergarten and first grade, and we have dress-up days. And you're supposed to dress up like an occupation. From the youngest of ages, we are taught to think that the occupation we choose is somehow the destiny of our life. It's the proof of who we are. It's our contribution to society. It feels like the job that we choose is the most important decision of our life. And with that comes the assumption that if I choose the right job, I'm going to have this great sense of fulfillment and meaning and purpose in my life. And so we put this expectation on an occupation to cause us to feel a certain way. The existential crisis is that all of us are in pursuit of this thing called fulfillment. We can use different words for it. Think about, we all know of movie stars who have all the fame and fortune, yet you hear about their life and you find out they're miserable. I recall Jim Carrey at one point, I think in a commencement speech, he said, I wish everyone could be rich and famous for one day so they could know what this really is. And his point was, it's not much at all. We all know people that are superstar ball players. We know of their lives, and we know they're making more money than we could ever spend in a lifetime. We all know that they're cheered by thousands of people. They're getting to play the game, but we also look at their lives and we hear the stories and think, why do they need drugs? Aren't they happy with what they have? We've all seen people that are wildly successful in their occupations and they live in the greatest neighborhood, but then you find out they're dominated by things like anxiety or depression, and you're like, oh, wait a second. There's a book written by a rabbi, I believe, and the whole premise of the book is millionaires are wondering, why are there poor people that are so happy? The other premise of the book is these millionaires asking themselves, why are we not? There's an existential crisis within all of us that we need to be aware of and talk about, and realize that finding a perfect job doesn't solve this crisis. And if we think that it will, we'll end up, like I mentioned earlier, just chasing after a job that's going to make us feel different about our lives. And it's only going to lead to a greater sense of frustration and pain. Now, this is what I've been waiting to get to talk about the one big answer to the one big problem. You see, although we've all been raised to think that the job is going to answer every problem in your life, it's going to be the one thing that solves it all. It's just not true. For most people, it's this crisis within for fulfillment that causes us to then think, oh, I have the wrong job. But actually, maybe we need a whole different life. But wait, not a whole different life, meaning let's change where we live and buy a different car and go to a different state and marry someone different and get a different dog. No, not that. The way to change your whole life is by changing how you think about your whole life. And I want to share with you this one thought that I believe changes everything about how we specifically approach our work. And that is this: jobs do not bring us our purpose. Instead, we bring our purpose to our jobs. You see, if we look at our jobs and think, well, if I get a certain job, it will bring me purpose, we're going to go to a job and ask that job to give us something that really it can't give. Instead, I have a purpose and I choose to take it to my job. You see, jobs don't make us. We make jobs. Said differently, jobs do not make us meaningful. We bring meaning to the job. Jobs don't make us important. We make jobs important. A person who knows their purpose can take that purpose not just to their work, but take it everywhere they go. And the person who lives with this clarified sense of purpose will begin to build a fulfilling life because they bring purpose to everything they do, everywhere they go, every relationship, and that begins to build this fulfilling life. So the big answer to the big problem is to clarify your purpose and begin to pursue it in all that you do. But there's one issue with this answer, is who knows their purpose? When have we ever sat around in circles as human beings and narrowed out what our purpose is? When do we get to talk about this simple yet powerful thought about what your purpose is? Almost everything in life is categorized according to its purpose. If you go into a grocery store or a big home improvement store, everything is kind of grouped according to what its purpose is. If it's for repairing the outside of a house, there's a certain category or location in the store for it. If it's bathroom products, it's in a certain location. Everything is organized according to what it's for. The problem is, for most of us as human beings, we don't know what we are for. And so it's hard for us to build a fulfilling life because we don't even know what our purpose is. I recall talking to some high schoolers one time. I was asked to speak to some seniors at a roundtable discussion. And I asked them, I said, I'm going to ask a question to you. I don't want you to answer it. I just want you to tell me how it makes you feel when you hear it. And I said, what is your purpose? And the seniors looked at me, and a couple of them were even mad. And one of them said, why have we never talked about that? All these years in school, and they're about to graduate, and no one's ever talked about what is your purpose. Someone else said, why has no one ever asked me that before? You see, when someone knows their purpose, they can build a life that's purposeful. And that causes this fulfillment. But without knowing our purpose, we keep going to things outside of us, and we ask those things outside of us to bring us purpose. And we tend to do this specifically with our jobs. So we look for a job and think that when we walk into that building, we're going to square our shoulders and think, there it is. I am fulfilled. But life doesn't work that way. But when a person knows their purpose, they will begin to bring their purpose into everything in their life. And with this way of thinking, this way of existing, it's like fulfillment becomes like an IV hooked into our veins. And there's this sense of fulfillment that we can have, not just with our work, but with our play, with our families, even going to the grocery store. Because everywhere you go, you have purpose, but only if you actually know your purpose. As best as I can with words and stories, I want to describe to you how liberating it is to clarify your purpose. For so much of my life, I really wanted to make a difference with my life, but I felt like I was trapped outside of being able to do it. I think about this young man that I met. He was 18 years old. He was a soccer player at a big high school. So he was in great physical condition, yet he had been to the hospital a couple of times to have his heart checked. And the reason it was being checked is because of the unbelievable anxiety he had about life. He told me that when he was at school, if they asked about the future, what are you going to do after you graduate? He said he would look at his smartwatch and just watch his heart rate go crazy. He had so much pressure on himself over making the perfect choice with his life. Clarifying your purpose enables you to be set free from trying to make the perfect choice and instead be able to look at your life and see all the opportunities that you get to choose from. A man named Scott, who's become a friend of mine in the Chicago area, when we first met, he said, I feel like I have spent years searching for a dot, searching for the perfect alignment, the perfect position, the perfect spot on planet Earth where he belongs, specifically in terms of occupation. So clarifying your purpose enables you to be liberated from finding the perfect thing, and instead you can look to bring purpose into everything. Number 2, having a purpose that you've clarified sets you free from the fear of living an unfulfilled life. I talked to a man one time. He said, I feel like I'm living on the back row of a movie theater, and I'm just staring at the screen, and I'm watching my life go by on it. But I'm just on the back row. I'm doing drugs to sedate myself so that I don't really realize what I'm doing, that my life is just drifting by as if it's on a screen, but I'm not really in it. We so long to live a fulfilling life. When a person doesn't know their purpose, they constantly try to find it in ways outside of them, which doesn't work. Or we try to drown out our heart's desire for purpose and meaning, which doesn't work. But the person who knows their purpose is liberated from the fear of living an unfulfilled life. And instead, you become liberated for building an incredible, meaningful life. Number three, when you're clear on your purpose, you're set free from the confusion and complexity that leads to stagnancy. When you don't know what to do, and so you end up doing nothing. And when you don't do anything, it's like cobwebs build around your life. And then you start fearing the spider. And then your life becomes focused on spiders and cobwebs, when really the problem was the stagnancy. A person who's clear on their purpose can live with intentionality. There's such a force within you that can move you to action instead of always sitting back, looking around, wondering, what's the right thing for me? It's not the thing out there that we have to perfectly decide. It's the purpose inside of us that we clarify, and then we can just boldly look for how we can intentionally bring our purpose into the world. Number four, we can be set free. We can be liberated from the peer pressure that causes comparison, where we're always seeing outside of us what other people are doing, what they're driving, what jobs they have, the success of their life, or what seems to be the success of their life. And it constantly makes us think, I'm missing it, I'm missing it, I'm missing it. Why don't I have that position? Why don't I have that house? Why don't I have this reality in my family? And it causes us to live with such a mindset of comparing ourselves to others that instead of building our own life, we just constantly live in disappointment of our life because of what we see in other people. But the person who's clear on their purpose, instead of comparing ourselves to people, we live out our purpose with people, which is incredibly powerful. I recall a young man named Jacob who was struggling with about 3 bad habits in his life, things that had become addictions. He was struggling with mental health problems. He was depressed for a number of years. He was battling suicidal thoughts. And when he told me about all this stuff, I said, Jacob, we're not going to talk about any of your problems. We're going to talk about your purpose. He had become so down on himself that he couldn't even hang out with his friends. He said, I can't even text to them. It's too hard because where my life is. When he started to think about his purpose and take steps towards his purpose, he then took steps with people, and it unlocked his life. He didn't need to fix his problems. He needed to chase his purpose with others instead. Most people spend a vast majority of their life trying to fix their problems alone rather than chase their purpose with people. Number 5, the person who's clear on their purpose can be set free from the fear that stops us in our tracks. Fear is this thing that is always lurking all around us. Chances are, if there's anything good for you to do with your life, fear will always tell you, no, 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 it's too dangerous, it's too messy, not sure that's going to work out. And behind us is a lazy chair saying, hey, just hang out back here, relax, it's safer here. The person who's clear on their purpose can be liberated to use their faith instead, and use their faith and allow themselves to dream about what they can do in this world. Instead of living every day in fear of what could go wrong, the person who's clear on their purpose looks to use their faith to plug their purpose into the world every day. I think of a couple business friends of mine, Greg and Dustin, 2 men that had so much potential, but they were kind of in between different types of endeavors that they could do. And after going through our work on purpose, they both told me it's like It opened the floodgates. We tend to get in places where we're kind of stuck in our purpose. It makes us stuck in who we are. And so we don't really know what to do with people, even if we have talents with people and something to offer. But these two men talked to me about how when they clarified their purpose, it opened up the floodgates in the work that they're doing with people. And number 6, clarifying your purpose liberates you from constantly questioning if you're doing the right thing with your life. And instead, you can be liberated for boldly showing up just the way you are 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can show up being yourself. I have a great friend named Chris who has such a heart for people, to really impact people, to help people, to love people, to encourage people. But he kind of felt like that because of the career he was working, he was kind of failing at doing that with people. And so he kind of lived, kind of held back, kind of with a cloud over his head, thinking, well, I have this job, so I'm not making the difference that I want. And going through our thoughts and the topic of purpose together, he realized that he could live out his purpose boldly right now. He even realized all the ways that he already was. And instead of looking at his life and wondering if he's doing the right thing, he started to realize, I am doing the right thing. And I can do it more. And I can do it more. And I can be more bold about it, more excited about it. And that thrills me to know that this great man is no longer living his life wondering if he's making the impact he was supposed to make. And instead, he's waking up every day looking for the kind of impact that he can make. One of my favorite stories is actually from my wife's work with women. She was meeting with this woman who was a stay-at-home mom, 2 little kids, a husband that she loved, but she had also gotten to a place where she just couldn't get up in the morning. She was at a place where she was just depressed and just no reason for energy. And it's not what she wanted. Her husband didn't know what to say. What do the kids do? And it was really just holding back her life. And my wife began to meet with her, and the topic was purpose. It wasn't depression. It wasn't problems. It wasn't, how do you sleep better? How to get up in the morning. The topic was purpose. And when this woman began to be rekindled to the power of her purpose, she began to live differently. She began to get up and go. She looked for ways to be able to show up in the world for other people, boldly being herself. Another couple that comes to my mind is a man who had an affair on his wife. And he reached out to me and he said, I think it's all over. I've just messed up. And he's a great man. He really is. And I know when you hear me say he had an affair, it's hard to say, well, he's a great man. Listen, great people who hit moments of great crisis do things that make you think they're not a great person. So for him, where he had gotten to in life, his desire to live a big life, his desire to be passionate, had caused him to get to this place where he was just going through the motions. Nothing was exciting because he didn't know how to plug in to the power of his purpose. He didn't have clarity of purpose. And because of that, his confusion in this time of just despair, this time of boredom, caused him to have an affair. Now, when I met with him, I didn't talk about having affairs. I didn't talk about marriage. I reminded him about purpose and helped him clarify his purpose. And it changed how he lived. His wife, who had moved out, then reached out and asked, what's going on with my husband? And she began to meet with my wife to talk not about problems, but about purpose. And his wife saw the change in him But she also noticed the change that needed to happen in her because she was living an unfulfilled life. She wasn't excited about the life that she was living. The both of them together began to live differently together. They moved back in together. They made bold decisions to start a new business, and they just began to live like they've never lived before. Because they got clear on their purpose, they began to live differently. Where many people, when problems happen, life gets on hold and they just focus on their problems when there's a better pathway to change. So, what do you begin to think in your mind as you hear these stories of people's lives changing as they clarify their purpose? You probably have dueling mindsets happening. One is, I want to know my purpose. But you might also be thinking, but it's too late for me. It's too hard for me. It would take too long. Or you might have the fear that you'll find out what your purpose is and realize you've been living the wrong life. All of these things are just fear. It's all just fear. It's all just noise. Keep it simple. When you look in the mirror at yourself, can you simply answer the question of purpose? Because your heart is crying out for you to answer it. If you find yourself at a place in life where you look at your life and there's success, you have a job that this seems like a good job. People say it's a good job. It's paying the bills. We take good vacations. We have a nice house and cars, but there's a sense of emptiness or a lack of fulfillment, or you feel like there's more. If your heart is telling you that there's something more for you, it's because there's something more for you. It's not that there's something wrong with you. It may not even be that you need to change much about your life, but you may need to completely change how you look at your life. There might be more that you can add to your life. A perspective shift as you become clarified on your purpose can change how you interact with your entire life. And so as you sit here and you ponder these thoughts about purpose, I just want to compel you that if you can't simply look in the mirror and look at people and say, here's my purpose, I want to compel you of the importance. I want to compel you that you absolutely can know your purpose. You absolutely can. You don't want to be like the man that I heard of who was in the hospital, and in his final days, his adult son was with him at his bedside. And he looked at his son and he said, I think I finally know what life's about and why I'm here. And then he said, but now it's time for me to say goodbye. My friend, if you're watching this video, it's because your heart is crying out to know your purpose. Your heart isn't really crying out for a different job. It's crying out to know your purpose. And when you get clear on your purpose, you might find that you do your current job differently and it becomes fulfilling. Or you might find that, yeah, a different job is a better fit for your purpose. But I want to encourage you that you can know your purpose. And like most people, you'll need help with that journey. And that's why we're here. That's why we exist, is to help people know their purpose and overcome any setbacks that prevent people from living it out boldly. So I want to invite you to go on a journey with us to knowing your purpose. We put together a program called the Purpose Mastermind. It's 8 conversations full of stories and pictures, conversations, and action steps that help you clarify your purpose. And through the process, find this sense of freedom to be able to go live it out boldly. So if this is you, and this seems like the right fit for you, I want to invite you to reach out to me and set up a discovery call. If you're a lady, I'll probably set up that call for you to have this with my wife. She does the same work with women that I do with men, and this work we also do with couples. So if you're in this place and you feel like my life is successful, but it feels empty, I want to encourage you. Listen to your heart. It's crying out for more. It's crying out for meaning. It's crying out for purpose. And you can know your purpose. So reach out, set up that discovery call. We'd love to have a conversation with you.